everybody, and welcome back to another episode of mine. And today, I'm going to dive back into the horror genre, but I'm going to talk about a specific film, and that's the movie from 2003, Freddy vs. Jason. Now, this film has had mixed reviews from people. A lot of fans liked it, but there were some who were against it. Personally, I loved this movie because I found it to be, while it wasn't in exactly as big a horror film as it was advertised to be, it was one of those where it found its way between the sense of humor of Krueger during his later films, and but yet it still kept that dark and scariness that both franchises, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, were known for up to that time. And okay, let's start off with the popularity. Thing is, even though in the 90s is when most people remember that the idea of this film was being suggested to where you have the two face off, it was actually in the mid to late, it was actually during the late 80s was the initial idea of having these two face off in a battle against each other, but there were issues for this, which I'll get to later in this video. Also, as for my hair, this is what happens when I tend to let it dry and forgot that I had my fan focused on me at the time. So, sorry for the Doc Brown craziness look. Now, back to the popularity of this film. Also, another reason for the popularity of this film, and to me, for this movie is actually considered to be a big box office success. But for those who don't consider it that, I would hope that they would at least consider it a cult film, so that because it does still live up to the idea of the film, and it did have a high popularity that's still grown even today. Even like its original series, even though it's been rebooted, same as the Friday the 13th. But another reason for the popularity of this film, the Battle of the Kings is what I refer to it as. But it's when you have the top tier, the top tier characters of a genre facing off. Now, there would be an argument that could be made that it was actually Michael Myers that should have been in this. And there were rumors that the original idea was to have Michael versus Jason instead, but the characters were too similar. So they chose Freddy for the different styles of the characters' ways to murder. Is actually what is the rumor behind that story on why it wasn't Michael versus Jason. And Michael is in Michael Myers from the Halloween franchise. But examples of the Battle of the Kings that I could think of: Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. I know I'm mispronouncing that name, but King Ghidorah, even though, like I said, I know I'm mispronouncing that, the three-headed dragon that it faced, that has had many changes to its life. But, like I said, any of the Godzilla versus movies. But also in the 1970s, there was a movie that came out called Frankenstein versus Dracula, which was about Dracula finding a doctor who was the last descendant of the Frankenstein family, who was inventing this serum of blood, this blood serum that was supposed to give life, that was supposed to be able to resurrect people. But Dracula thought that, going under a different name in the movie, or at least in the credits anyways, it wanted the serum because he thought it would give him the ability to be able to survive in sunlight. an interesting fact about that movie, Frankenstein vs. Dracula in the 70s, it features Lon Chaney Jr., who is known for the role of um, Larry Talbot in the Wolfman movie. And as far as I know, it's the film he's most known for. And he was a great actor. But that name Talbot would later be used, even in when it comes to the Wolfman or the werewolf, however you want to look at it. Later on in movies, including an animated movie known as Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman, where their neighbor was named Talbot and is a descendant of a family of werewolves. And another King of the Battle of the Kings, Alien vs. Predator, which came out in 2004, the year after, in the following year. It's often shortened to AVP instead of Alien vs. Predator, though, which I find a little weird. Another thing about this movie that proved it, and this proves its popularity, is that it made $114 million worldwide. 82 million of that was in the U.S. alone, box office wise. I got this information from IMDb and BoxOfficeMojo.com. They're both the highest grossing films in their franchises. The second highest in the Friday the 13th series was actually Jason X from 2002. Before that. And in Nightmare on Elm Street, before they did the reboot, which became second place, the fourth movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, it was second place until, like I said, the reboot in 2010. But an interesting fact about Nightmare on Elm Street 4 was that it actually features, in an interview that Robert Englund gave, it actually features his favorite scene in the entire series, and he isn't even in the scene, where it features the main hero and their love interest in a dream loop, which he sees as being reflective of being in a dream. And they come out of this, and the hero would come out of the restaurant known as the Crave Inn Diner, which at first I didn't catch till later, and I noticed that, and then I thought how humorous, because the director is Wes Craven. I thought that was an interesting play on the name. But even when the remake was made in the reboot was made in 2010, this movie, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, became the third highest Nightmare on Elm Street rated film in the franchise, with Freddy vs. Jason still being the first and still being number one. There were also other rumors to have been set, as I mentioned earlier, the Michael Myers versus Jason Voorhees instead of Freddy versus Jason. But another one that they were later talking about, and again, proving the popularity of this film being made, was a Freddy vs. Jason 2 movie, where it was going to be Freddy versus Jason versus Ash from the Evil Dead trilogy, starring Bruce Campbell as Ash. Well, it was on it, and Robert Englund even admitted to this in a big interview thing with fans and everybody, but it can never get greenlit. But for those of you who may be disappointed by this, you can actually look up the six-issue comic book series that was made from November 7th to March 2008 that is based off of this idea. Again, it was made into a comic book series, so in a way it did actually get made, just not in the movie series that it was going to. Another rumor that went around was by Child's Play creator Don Mancini. I'm sorry if I messed up his name. But he actually had the idea, and this one was admitted by him on the Necronomicast podcast. And the idea would be that Jason and Freddy, I mean, not Jason Freddy, but Jason and Chucky would meet up in Elm Street at one of the houses, and it would actually be discovered that these two were fans of each other, and that they would have fun doing their killings until they realized that Elm Street wasn't big enough for the both of them, and then they would turn on each other and do their big fight to the finish to decide who would be the winner. And this one was actually an interesting idea to me, because I actually think this one could have worked out nicely, the same as the one with Jason versus Freddy versus Ash would have. But I think this one would have worked out better as an idea. Jason versus Freddy versus Hellraiser is how it was supposed to be titled, according to the rumors. But the idea was that they would end up, after the Jason versus Freddy movie, in the sequel, they would somehow wound up in the Hellraiser dimension, where Jason and Freddy would end up fighting with Pinhead and his Cenobites, and come to some sort of triple threat, to where the three main people, Jason, Freddy, and Pinhead, the main character for the Hellraiser series, would end up facing off against each other in their version of this fight to the finish. Now, like I said earlier, there were issues with this film that it took to 2003 to get made. One of the issues being that they'd been wanting to do this film since, like I said, the late 80s, but they had a problem with this because there were two different production companies that owned the rights to the characters. Whereas New Line Cinema owned the rights to Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees was under Paramount Pictures rights. But this would change in the 90s when Paramount was bought out by New Line Cinema. And then it became an issue with the Motion Picture Association and trying to get this film down to what they would consider R ratings. But every time they turned around, something in the film, there was too much in some way that would push it to where it would go from an R rating to actually being an NC-17 or an X rating, even, whether it was sex, violence, and gore, or the language. But something was always pushing it among those things. But again, and the thing is that when you watch Jason Goes to Hell the Friday, this idea of this crossover was actually teased in the film, and you'll see it being obvious when it happens when you watch the movie. But again, like I said, for 10 years, this movie, after the final Friday ended, couldn't get made because of it having to have multiple writers, and they could never get it down to the R rating due to sex, violence, and gore, and language being an issue with the Motion Picture Association. And one of the ideas they'd actually suggested for this, apparently, was that a bunch of teenagers actually worshipped Freddy Krueger. For one idea of it, like I said, they worshipped Freddy Krueger and tried to resurrect him. These people were known as the Fredheads, and as a way to end Freddy's reign of terror that he was bringing up, they were going to bring in Jason, somehow resurrecting him, to fight Freddy and kill him. Now I'd like to get on to some interesting facts I found out about this. Again, I got these from IMDb, but I checked other places that also had these facts listed and had gotten it from like interviews and surprising stories that were told. The guy who portrayed Jason in Freddy vs. Jason had to have some dental work done during the filming, but he didn't have time to get his makeup off. So he showed up at the actual dentist office in his makeup, without the mask. So he had the makeup and the messed up look to him, along with the clothes that he was wearing being those of Jason Voorhees. And he actually scared the people at the dentist office so bad because they thought he was an escaped psychopath that they almost called the cops on him until they found out who he was and that he was actually a patient and was able to explain it. Robert Englund, this being the last film he actually, film and TV-wise, that he appears in as Freddy Krueger. As in the 80s, and as in the 80s, he had a brief stint where he did a show known as Freddy's Nightmares, in which he portrayed Freddy. And for you Law and Order SVU fans, Marissa was in one of these episodes. I recommend you actually go and watch it because it's a very good one that she's in. But again, Robert Englund during this film didn't realize how hot the fires actually were due to the makeup and stuff he was wearing until they went to actually try and remove it at one point, and some of the makeup and stuff had actually bonded to his skin. Also, another thing about this, I don't know for certain when the X-Men United movie came out, but the lake that they used for the Camp Crystal Lake scenes in this movie was filmed for the final scenes of the X2 X-Men United film, and both casts actually stayed in the same hotel even. But again, I'm not sure if it's that both films came out in 2003 or if it's just saying that they actually stayed in the same hotel because of the location having been the same for both of them when they did their films. Another thing is that I find interesting is that the guy who played Jason was actually caught on fire by special effects sparks during the film. During one of the scenes. But due to his prior work as a stuntman, he was actually able to remain calm until the stagehands came along and were able to come over to the fire extinguisher and put it out. And for those who think everything's got to be filmed in other countries, this is actually the very first Nightmare on Elm Street movie to not be filmed in the United States. So, again, this actually proves that not everything has to be done in order to save money outside of the U.S., in my view. Brent Chapman, who plays Blake's father in the movie, and Kyle Levine, who plays the character of Freebird, basically your stoner, both appeared in the movie Halloween Resurrection, making them the first actors to appear in a Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street film. Because Freddy vs. Jason is considered both a Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street film because of it being a crossover, and the Halloween film for Halloween Resurrection. Something I didn't know that's actually really surprising to me is that Peter Jackson was offered to direct this, and he turned it down. But the part that really surprises me is that Rob Zombie was offered to direct. But the part that makes sense is why he why he turned it down was because he did it so that he could produce his movie House of a Thousand Corpses. This is something I noticed that a lot of fans that I talked to didn't notice, is that in the movie, in the Freddy vs. Jason movie, Krueger says a line of how sweet dark meat. This is actually a variation on a line he spoke in the Nightmare on Elm Street 4 movie, How Sweet Fresh Meat. But in the movie of Freddy vs. Jason, there are many more references, such as the house that the main character in this movie lives in is 1428 Elm, which is where in the original movie the main character Nancy Thompson lived. But like I said, there are many other references where there are variations of this, such as the Sweet Fresh Meat, or they're more direct, like the 1428 Elm Street reference. Kelly Rowland is in this movie, a singer who was also part of the band Destiny's Child with Beyonce Knowles, was actually had a lot of journalists and television hosts who tried to embarrass her for doing this movie, but she states for the record, whenever they'd ask her about it, or whenever anybody would try to embarrass her or pick on her for doing the movie, that she enjoyed making the film and that she feels no shame. I mean, she has nothing to be ashamed for because she had so much fun doing it. Also, something I found on IMDb, but if somebody could actually verify this for me, I'd be really happy to know this, if it's actually true, is that the actress Monica Keena, as a child, was so scared of Freddy Krueger, of the character Freddy Krueger, that her school teachers were actually said to have thought she was being abused at home because of her fear. Again, like I said, this is something I saw on IMDb that I couldn't find anywhere else, so that's why I questioned the validity of it. And okay, now on to another fact. Hypnosil, the drug used in this movie, is stated to keep patients from dreaming. But it was, even though it's seen in this movie, it was actually used in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 in 1987 for the same reason, that it kept people from dreaming. The main character, the character Nancy Thompson, now a worker at a mental asylum, is actually taking this drug. The interesting twist about this is that she recommends it to a psychiatrist to give to the patients to stop them from dreaming temporarily, so in hopes that they can get to the bottom of everything that's going on. And the doctor, Neil Gordon, the psychiatrist, Dr. Neil Gordon in this, is actually talking to, in 3, is actually talking to the ghost of a nun who turns out to be Freddy Krueger's mother. But he at first is against the idea because he thinks that it's just the patients having troubles. And he states that the drug is too dangerous to be giving kids, and that Nancy herself shouldn't be taking it, as it was not approved by the FDA at that time. Like I said, this is in 1987. In the 2003 movie, they actually looked this up on the computer to find out about the drug because they're wanting to get, because the people being hunted by Freddy in the movie are wanting to stop their dreams so that Freddy can't come after them. Well, the thing is, according to the computer, when they look up the information for it, it still hasn't been approved by the FDA, possibly due to a scene that's shown in the movie where which to me this actually makes sense for why, is that too much of the Hypnosil given to somebody can actually place the patient into a coma. And that's, like I said, the thing that's kind of interesting about that is that is showing that it's like 16 years later, and it still wasn't approved by the FDA, and still in what's supposed to be the trial stages, yet the hospital is using it, which to me would show that this hospital might need to be investigated a little bit. And chronologically, Freddy vs. Jason would be placed after Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare. Freddy's Dead, the Final Nightmare, and Jason Goes to Hell, the Final Friday, but before having Jason X. The only reason Jason X was released first is because this film had so much trouble with development, mainly due to getting it down to the R rating with the Motion Picture Association. At the beginning of the film, Freddy Krueger is shown giving a monologue about how the children were so important and all these killings he did. But it also shows scenes from the movies, from the original movie up to Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, but does not include one scene from from Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which came out between the two films. But that is because Wes Craven's New Nightmare is not considered canonical to the series. It's considered to be a separate thing altogether. Which I think they should do with Jason X. They should consider it to be separate. Another interesting fact, the actor playing Jason, in order to prove his loyalty to the fans and viewers, as well as proving that he's actually wanting to play this character and be loyal to it, he actually did the first interview about the movie in the makeup, in the clothes, and in the hockey mask of Jason Voorhees the entire interview, as his way to prove to everybody how serious he was about playing this role. And for you pro wrestling fans, this was something I didn't know, even. A former WCW superstar, current WWE superstar, Rey Mysterio Jr., is in this movie as a stunt double for Freddy Krueger. He's listed under the name Oscar Gutierrez. Again, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And Bryan Singer, the director of the X-Men trilogy, was known to visit the set as he was a big fan of the Friday the 13th franchise. An interesting fact that it has to do with the other movies rather than this one, is that 1983 is the only year in the 80s that there was not a Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street film released. And another interesting fact, and this I thought about for a long time, but I didn't know until more recently. Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, when you watch the beginning of the movie, it says that the film is supposed to take place 10 years from the year it comes out, and from the year it came out, which is 1991, so this movie is supposed to be taking place in 2001 when it happens, because it's supposed to be a 10 years from now detail. Well, something that makes that interesting is that Freddy vs. Jason is supposed to take place somewhere between 2 to 4 years after, meaning Freddy vs. Jason is actually taking place somewhere between 2003 to 2005, putting it basically right on track, actually, if you were to take it into all honesty. And another thing I really enjoyed about this movie is that it proved that horror movies can have a good soundtrack or good music in it without it just having to be like some random score. Though, one good thing about the scores to Nightmare on Elm Street and the Friday the 13th series, the main theme for both characters, Freddy and Jason, were actually both used in the Freddy vs. Jason movie. You could hear the children even doing the nice little song, the 1-2, Freddy's coming for you, as well as the few little notes that were played to be Freddy's theme, and then the that they used for the for the Friday the 13th movie to be Jason's theme. But back to my other point about this, showing that it showed that good music could be played. The band Il Nino with "How Can I Live" was actually the music video that they used to promote this film. It also had the band Killswitch Engage with their song "When Darkness Falls." Slipknot was on the soundtrack, and a lot of other ones. Well, this, from what I could find, music for the first film was pretty much just the score that they did for it. The second film had some song. It had a soundtrack that was other songs, but it was mostly stuff like Bing Crosby and stuff that basically would be considered old then and wasn't really considered that much of a rock sound to it, or considered to be all that great. But starting with number 3, they started using music to promote the movie. They started having music videos that promoted the movie in some way, and having bands that weren't only from rock but also hip hop, examples of this between both, and I'm not just listing hip hop or rock, but examples of this being done. I'm not sure if the band's name is Dokken or Dokken, but the song Dream Warriors and Into the Fire were in the third movie, and the music video for Dream Warriors actually features Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, Patricia Arquette as her character, Kristen, and the band where Freddy's actually hunting Kristen in the video, and the band does their part. But it actually has an interesting twist at the end of it that I find to be very, very funny, and also at the same time a nice twist in it. Number 4, in the fourth movie, The Dream Warrior, the Dream Master, which again, like I said previously, featured Robert Englund's favorite scene in the entire series, as he admitted in an interview. The Vinnie Vincent Invasion, their song Love Kills, while it shows the lead singer singing throughout in the video, it also features clips from the movie. From the movie itself, and the Fat Boys, a rap and rock mix type deal, in my view, but mainly hip hop rap styling. Did a song called "Are You Ready for Freddy," which a lot of people have shortened to "Ready for Freddy," which has Robert Englund in it as Freddy Krueger, and the house of 1428 Elm Street. Well, the deal is, in the video, one of the band members is supposed to be inheriting the house from their uncle Freddy, which was a lesser-known member of the family. But it features a lot of comedy in the video, and is also considered to be. It also has the rap song. It also has the rap lyrics in it that actually makes sense, and even mentions previous films in the lyrics. At least once in the lyrics. But the interesting thing is that a lot of people misremember this and actually list that song as being in the fifth movie, not the fourth. The fifth movie features Samantha Fox with her song "Now I Lay Me Down," and Bruce Dickinson, the lead singer of the band Iron Maiden, who did a song called "Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter." This one went more heavy on the rock and heavy metal, and had only 3 or 4 rap songs in it, besides the actual score that was done for the movie. Now, the sixth movie had the Goo Goo Dolls with the song "I'm Awake Now," which is played at the which is played at the very beginning of the movie, where it even does a quote. I think it's by Nietzsche in the sixth one, in the Freddy's Dead movie, and then also does the line that Freddy Krueger became known for, "Welcome to Prime Time" bit. Welcome to Prime Time, and uses the B word for it. Sorry, I'm not trying to actually say it, because I know if I do, that they'll more than likely get me for it and say that I have to enable an age restriction, and I don't want to do that. Another thing about it is that the song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is mentioned in this. I mean, it's played in the movie at one point by the band Iron Butterfly. Well, the interesting fact about that song is that when the song originally came out way back in the 70s, I think it was. It might have been the 60s, but it was somewhere between the 60s and the 70s. I'm certain on that fact. I'm certain on that. The original title of it was actually supposed to be In the Garden of Eden, is actually what it's supposed to say. But the band had been drinking a lot that night. Though there are some versions of this story that said they were actually on drugs. But according to the actual bandmates and the guy who actually wrote the song, when he wrote down the lyrics for his buddy to sing, they were all so drunk that the guy was misreading the lyrics and slurring the words, and he said In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, which is actually what the song became. And they also named the album that. And just one side of the album is that song on its own, which I found interesting. And I'd like to leave your comments in the section if you know of any interesting details or whether you enjoyed this movie or not. And also, again, please leave me a suggestion of something I could discuss in future videos, because I actually do read the comments and I like to know what you all think as well. Have fun, and I look forward to making my next video, and hopefully it'll be something you guys suggested or something you'll enjoy.